Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today's video is just going to be a really chill one where I go over my reading stats for the year 2024, and I'm also going to try to do a flip through of all the spreads in my reading journal. So I chunked her up a little bit over the course of I believe it was only 7 months or maybe even less than that I used it for. This is a stamp pad accident, so I had this open and I opened the cover on top of it, so yeah. But I'm actually going to start with the reading stats in the back before flipping through any of my journal spreads, assuming that that's what people are curious about. And I'm just going to adjust the angle of the camera right here, get a little bit closer. All right, I think that looks good. So 2024, I read a total of 334 things. Sorry, I'm just going to adjust this a little bit again. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. Yeah, I read a total of 334 things, and then I have stats for the source, medium, and format. And for all the paper I have here, I've actually used sticky printer paper because it was much easier for me to do that rather than trying to stick everything down with glue, and it just made my life so much easier. But to the sources, I split them by stuff I read online via Kindle Unlimited, through the library, and then all the things that I own. So the things I own were 180 out of the 334, which made up 53.9%. The stuff I read through the library made up 99 of the 334 for 29.6%. The stuff I read online made up 49 of the 334 for 24.7%. And Kindle Unlimited, I only read 6 out of the 334, which was 1.8%. So ever since I started collecting books physically, I haven't been using my Kindle Unlimited subscription a whole lot, although it still comes in handy. But I paid for it the entire year, and I'm just trying to figure out if there's a better way to work around that without having to pay for it the entire year, since I'm not getting that much use out of it. But for the formats, I split it into 3. So ebooks, stuff I read physically, and then audiobooks. So ebooks made up 78 for 23.4%. Physical was the largest chunk of things that I read. So things I read physically, 237 for 70.9%. And I listened to 19 audiobooks, which made up 5.7%. For the medium, I split it into books, manga, web novels, and everything else. And I believe for everything else, I've lumped manhwa and webtoons, and maybe even some manhwa in there. I believe that was everything that I lumped into everything else because they made out such tiny portions. I didn't want to give each one of those things its own section because it would just be like really, really tiny. So manga was most of what I read, 249 volumes for 75%. I read 64 books for 19%. I read 9 web novels, which was 2%. So for web novels, it's a little bit hard to break them into books, so I just tracked them separately because you never really know the equivalent amount of books for some of these web novels. And then everything else, the manhwa, and webtoons, similar thing they're usually separated into seasons, and each season will have, I think on the average, it's usually about 50 chapters. So I just count the entire series as one thing. And the everything else that I've tracked in manhwa, and webtoons here is only the completed stuff that I read. The ongoing stuff I was unable to track, and that's just another thing. So yeah. And then down here, I've just made like a graph of my reading volume throughout the year from January through December. So my heaviest reading volume was in June. This was the month that I read all of Ballad of Sword and Wine, and I counted it as 8 books. So I read 13 books that month, which was also the month I read the most amount of books. And then I also read 32 volumes of, I want to say it was manga, but I think I've just assigned this color as comics and webtoons. My lowest reading volume was in December, which I very much expected. It was a very busy month for me. I just come back from my solo trip, and there were a lot of things that I was trying to do. Work got busy out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that to happen, but yeah, I only ended up reading 4 books and 3 volumes of manga, or maybe there were some webtoons included in there. But yeah, that was my reading volume for the year, and I just really like that graph. And then I have a graphic of the amount of money I saved using the library last year. So a little over $900, almost $1,000 actually. All of the audiobooks I listened to through the library, 19 of them. Ebooks, I believe those were mostly volumes of manga, because for regular books, I'd rather listen to them in audio format if I can get them through the library. And then physical stuff was 55. I believe that was mostly 𝕄𝔼𝔻𝕀𝔸 of the Dawn, and I want to say it was Blue Flag. So I read 40 volumes of 𝕄𝔻𝔻𝕀𝔸 of the Dawn. Blue Flag, I believe, is 9 volumes. I can't exactly remember what the other 6 volumes of manga were. I don't exactly remember borrowing a physical book to read from the library. That wasn't a manga volume last year, but those are the ones I can remember borrowing from the library. And then for manga, I also have a breakdown here. Oops. It suddenly got darker. I'm just gonna go on. For manga, I have a split here as well. I've split them by demographic. So the 4 main ones, seinen, josei, shonen, and shoujo, as well as everything else. So for everything else, I believe I tracked yaoi and yuri manga in there. So my heaviest or the highest percentage of manga that I read was shoujo with 81 volumes, 32.5%. The next one was seinen, actually, 58 volumes for 23.3%, and then josei, 18 volumes, 7.2%. Lowest here was shonen, 10 volumes at 4%. I came to the realization last year that I don't enjoy shonen as much as I used to. Granted, I got my start in manga and anime with shonen stuff like Naruto, Bleach, Full Metal Alchemist, and I really enjoyed them while I was growing up, but they were also the only titles I was kind of aware of in that medium for a while. And then eventually my knowledge expanded to other demographics, and I realized that I enjoyed them more than shonen. That might be the case, or maybe a lot of shonen that came out last year I just didn't enjoy a whole lot. And even the ones that were really popular, I can see the appeal in reading them, but I'd rather be reading something else than reading those. And this is just me trying to be the most efficient with my time. So I just enjoy other demographics more than I enjoy shonen these days. So I've come to the conclusion that maybe, just maybe, I am not a shonen girly after all. And that is totally fine, because there are so many titles in other demographics that are interesting to me and I would love to get into. But for everything else, yaoi and yuri, I had 82 volumes, 32.9% of my manga volumes. And then down here, I've made like a, what do you even want to call this? Like a collage of all the things that I rated 5 stars in 2024. Very, very tiny, but it was helpful to have sticky printer paper for this, because all I had to do was rip it off and just paste it down. I'm going to start from the top. I didn't exactly put them in order because I just cut them off and pasted it out however I wanted. But Cherry Magic, for the most part, nearly all the volumes of Cherry Magic that I read last year were 5 stars. There were some of them that were maybe 4 because they featured a whole lot of the other couple, or maybe much more of the other couple than the volumes usually did. And I can't exactly say that I am very invested in their relationship right now, unfortunately. But for the most part, Cherry Magic is always a 5 star for me. Blood on the Tracks, I read 2 volumes of that last year, and I think I rated either the first or the second one 5 stars. I can't remember which one it was. Blue Flag, there were some of the volumes that I found to be a bit lacking, but I think I ended up rating about 2 of the 9 volumes 5 stars. These 2 are web novels. Accidentally Married a Man Full of Vinegar, I recommend it, 5 stars. Devil Venerable Also Wants to Know, I also recommend that, 5 stars. All the web novels that I have here and I've rated 5 stars, I recommend. Honestly, a whole lot of the things here because I rated them 5 stars. My Girlfriend's Child, I only ended up rating 1 volume, but I actually really enjoyed that 1 volume, so I rated 5 stars. And then another thing about my rating system that I should mention is sometimes I rate based off of vibes, but once I start comparing some of these titles to the others, I get the urge to almost modify my rating for some of the other things, because I just feel like, oh, I rated this 5 stars, but it wasn't exactly on the same level as this other title that I rated 5 stars. So do I want to rate that other one a little bit lower? But in the moment, I enjoyed it enough that I rated it 5 stars. So I just left all my 5 star ratings as they were for the most part. I hope that made sense to you. But yeah, moving on to the other things I rated 5 stars. This is a one-shot yaoi manga. I believe it's the Genius Puppeteer and no, the Genius Puppeteer Loves the Holy Knight, I want to say is the title. I rated 5 stars. I actually really enjoyed that. Akira, I rated exactly 1 volume, the second volume 5 stars. Dark Rise. This series gagged me, and I am still spending a lot of time thinking about everything that went down in the series. It was 5 stars for me. The first book, I think I rated the second book a little bit lower. Classmates, for the most part, the entire series was a 5 star for me as well. There were some volumes that were a little bit problematic that I didn't rate 5 stars. But I didn't rate them below 4 stars, I think, because I thought there was still a very important message that the author was trying to pass across in the story in general. Punch Drunk Love, I read the first volume physically before I continued the journey online, and this was so entertaining. I just had to rate it 5 stars. Puppy Love, this is also a one-shot yaoi manga that I rated 5 stars. I read it through the library and I ended up getting a physical copy because it was just so adorable. This is a BL manhwa, Smyrna and Capri. It was one of my favorite manhwa that I read last year. I actually read it 3 to 4 times, I believe, but I loved it. Remnants of Filth. I think I rated I want to say maybe 2 to 3 volumes that came out last year, 5 stars. Paradise Kiss. The entire journey was a 5 star for me. Yona of the Dawn. For the most part, I want to say about 95% of the time, all the manga volumes were 5 stars for me. Innocent, I read, I think it was Omnibus 1 and 2, so volumes 1 through 6 last year. I have yet to read the last omnibus. I'm just going to try to get through it this month, but both omnibuses, I believe I rated 5 stars. Then Dekoboko, Sugar Days and Bittersweet Days, I believe I rated one or the other 5 stars. It's a really cute story. I enjoyed it. Ballad of Sword and Wine, the entire experience was a 5 star for me. Lullaby of the Dawn, this is another story that gagged me. For the most part, I believe maybe the second, third, and fourth volumes I rated 5 stars. I don't know if I have to reread or just try to start the story all over again and take notes, but I think the space in between waiting for volumes is starting to make me lose track of the story a little bit, and I'm just not as it's not even that I'm not as invested, but I'm not as there's a word I'm looking for right here. I'm not in the story as much as I would like to be. So yeah, that's something I'm considering for the future. This is an ongoing series that I've been reading since 2023. The title is A Side Character's Love Story, and I've been really enjoying it. This is another one that I rate 5 stars for the most part, about 95% of the time. Old Fashioned Cupcake with Cappuccino, which was a sequel after the original one-shot Old Fashioned Cupcake. I really enjoyed this and rated it 5 stars. Sweat and Soap, this was my favorite seinen series of the year, I believe. I really enjoyed it. I rated most of the volumes 5 stars. Then this was a BL manhwa I read online titled Mastering the Secretary. It's a really short one and has like a little bit of a power dynamic relationship with an age gap, and it's very smutty for the most part, but in that short amount of time that it takes to read the story, I think it accomplished what it was meant to, and I enjoyed it immensely. There was a part of me that wished it went on for longer, but I feel like with stories like that, if they go on for longer, there isn't that much that you can write about, and for what the story was trying to accomplish, it did that best in how short it was, and I just enjoyed it. 5 stars. If you like smut with the dynamics that I've mentioned in about that the story revolves around, you should give that a try. I enjoyed it. This is another web novel, Dame web novel that I read titled Tail Hook. I've talked about this in my Dame wrap-up for the year. A lot of the Dame web novels here, so you can read that to get an idea of what they're about. That was 5 stars for me. I can do it. 5 stars. Golden Terrace, I read this with some friends, and the entire experience was still a 5 star for me. I just love this story. Run Away With Me Girl, I read, I believe it was just the 1 volume, but I rated it 5 stars. This is another BL manga that is an automatic 5 star for me, and this one is titled Our Not So Lonely Planet Travel Guide. I think I've talked about it a couple of times on my channel, but yeah, I really love this story. Then this is another BL manhwa titled Define the Relationship, or maybe it's a webtoon, I'm not sure what to call it, but I really enjoyed this. It was a 5 star for me. Then this was a shoujo manga that I read. I remember it was in May because I read it as part of a reading challenge. The title is The Savior's Book Cafe Story in Another World, I believe it's what it was titled. I rated just the first volume, 5 stars, and in my video where I go over everything that I read as part of that reading challenge, I explained why only the first volume got a 5-star rating. Then Don't Call It Mystery. This is another one that I rate 5 stars for the most part. I'm really enjoying this. It's an ongoing series as well. These two are also 𝕍𝕆𝔻𝕀𝔸 web novels. Married Thrice the Salted Fish, really enjoyed it. Mist, this is sci-fi. I also really enjoyed this. The one nonfiction that made it in here, What Happened to You? I believe the subtitle is Conversations on Trauma, Grief, and something else. I can't remember what it was, but this was a really interesting book, and I ended up picking up a physical copy of it because I like to reread it and annotate it. Thousand Autumns, I rated the last volume less than 5 stars. I remember that very vividly, but I believe the 4th volume was a 5-star for me. 𝕍𝕆𝔻𝕻, I always rate that 5 stars. The entire reading experience is a 5-star for me. My bias of loving this story very much makes me rate it 5 stars. And then 𝕍𝕻𝔻𝕻, To Be or Not to Be, a BL one-shot from Scarlett Baruchel that came out last year. I also really enjoyed that and rated it 5 stars. And then I have my favorite reads in different genres here. So for 𝕍𝕆𝔻𝕻, everything that I've already pretty much mentioned. Ballad of Sword and Wine, Mist, Tail Hook, Married Thrice the Salted Fish, Guide on How to Feel at Online Dating. I actually did not rate that 5 stars because I was comparing it with I Can Do It, which is another story by the same author. But if I had to rate them individually, it probably would have been a 5-star as well. So yeah. And then the last one here is Devil Venerable, Also Wants to Know. For manga, Our Not So Lonely Planet Travel Guide, Lullaby of the Dawn, Cherry Magic, Sweat and Soap, Innocent, and Yona of the Dawn. BL manhwa and webtoons, whatever you want to call it. Smyrna and Capri, Punch Drunk Love, and Define the Relationship. The sole Western novel here, Dark Rise. I loved it. And then just some other general stats. So I read 13,358 pages of books, listened to 208.9 hours of audiobooks. And then for manga, web novel, manhwa, and webtoons, I broke down all of those by chapters for a total of 3,300 chapters. So 1,840 chapters of manga, 885 chapters of web novels, 241 for manhwa, 159 for manhwa, and then 175 for webtoons. And that was my 2024 reading wrap-up in stats. I didn't expect that I was going to talk for that long, so I'm just going to do a quick flip through of my reading journal spreads. I started using this reading journal in June of 2024 because that was when I decided to make the switch back to physical journaling. Let me make sure that the full thing is showing. Yeah, it is. And there were a couple of spreads here that I planned to use that I didn't. This was my star rating, 𝕐𝕆, and just like a regular 0 to 5 star rating that I don't take through the 𝕐𝕆 rating system. I was meant to use this to track ongoing webtoons and manga that I was reading, but I didn't use it. And then here was to track my 2024 manga collecting goal as well as anticipated releases. I tracked both of these things on my manga tracking spreadsheet, so there really wasn't a need to try to make another version of it in my reading journal, which was why I didn't use it very much. This was meant to be like a shelfie of what I read in 2024 because I see a lot of people with reading journals do that, but I didn't get a chance to do it. And honestly, it's not something I really see myself using, so I didn't carry it over into my 2025 reading journal. This was meant to be like a battle of the books, which is another thing that I see people doing in their journals, where you pick your favorite read of every month and then you kind of put them against each other until you arrive at your favorite read of the year. I started mapping it out, but I didn't use it, so yeah. And that brings me to the first month that I actually started using this journal. Something went wrong with this cover spread, but we're not going to go into it. For the most part, I think I started by trying to get myself comfortable with physical journaling. So I did lots of writing and drawing by hand. I used some pictures here and there, and then some stickers, spec tape or washi tape here and there. This was the first spread where I tried to use multiple types of stationery or like scrap material to try to complete the spread. And although my calligraphy leaves very much to be desired, I've practiced a lot and gotten better, I like how the spread as a whole turned out. And I'm probably going to do another one for this series in 2025. The second season just ended. I can't remember when the third one starts, but yeah. And then here I started to use a little bit more washi tape, experiment with my calligraphy a little bit more. And then we come to July. I did a thing where I was trying to track everything that I read like day to day. So I think I used this much more in July, but I decided not to do it for any of the months after July. But in June, you can see that I put down what I read with different colors of markers, and I just marked the days that I read that title. And that was the point of the calendar, but I realized it wasn't something I enjoyed doing, so I just got rid of it. But I kept this, which was making a list of the things that I would like to read and ticking them off as I read them. So in July, I think I actually liked majority of the spreads that I did in July. And again, I'm starting to experiment more with using more mediums, so like markers, colored pens, and pictures. I actually stuck down some paper here, so I like that. Same thing here. I think I was in a hurry for this spread, so I didn't do a whole lot with it, but the important information of reviewing what I read, I was still able to get down there. I hope you cannot hear that. There is an ambulance making a lot of noise. It is past midnight right now. I hope everyone is safe because the floor is covered in snow. But yeah, Remnants of Filth, double page spread, 1,000 Autumns, 𝕍𝕍𝕍𝕍𝕍. Wait, I wasn't saying the titles before. Let's just go back to flipping. And then I started doing a thing in this month where I made a list of all the new series that I was trying out and reading the first volume, deciding if I wanted to keep reading them or not. For Monster and the Beast, the verdict was that the story wasn't for me. And for We Can't Do Just Plain Love, the verdict was that I would keep reading it eventually. I kind of enjoyed some of the things in the first volume, but it wasn't a priority for me to keep reading at the time, so I haven't continued past the first volume. And then August, instead of making like a list of everything that I wanted to read, I stuck down pictures of the covers instead, and I just put what I read down. Yeah, these were notes for my mid-year freak out tag, so let's just flip past that. And I honestly don't know what to say about the spreads, except the fact that I started to feel more comfortable in how I decided to create my spreads. And I've gotten the question sometimes of how I get inspiration for some of these spreads. This is another bunch of new series that I read in August. So this one was a definitely keep reading. The verdict for Reliving My Life with a Boyfriend Who Doesn't Remember Me was keep reading. I recently picked up the second volume, so I'll give that a read and see if I see myself reading the series in general. Happy Crappy Life, I read the first volume through the library, and the verdict was to keep reading if I see it, so it's conditional. 𝕍𝕍𝕍𝕍, I decided to keep reading it, but maybe online. Lobsters in Love wasn't really for me. My Dearest Patrolman, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep reading it, but it's a short series with 3 volumes, I believe. So I picked up the second volume recently, and I'll see how I feel about it. Which brings me to September, and then back to the topic of getting inspiration for a lot of my spreads. A lot of my spreads, I either get inspiration from them based on the theme of the story, and I try to replicate that theme somehow in a way that makes sense to me on paper. And for the most part, I have a very clear idea of what I want that to look like. Other times I'll get inspiration from maybe the colors or the fonts used on the covers, which if you watch some of the few journal with me videos that I have on my channel, you can see me talk through some of these things where I get inspiration from the covers to create the spreads in my reading journal. But that is mostly how I get my inspiration. And then I also get a lot of inspiration from Pinterest as well. I have an entire board dedicated to journaling inspiration. We're now in October. This was one of my favorite spreads of the year. This double-paged 𝕍𝕍𝕍𝕍 spread. I try to make it based on gaming, which was like the theme for both series. They were esports series, and I wanted to do something that looked very game-based for the both of them, and that was my inspiration for this spread. The GL readathon, this was one that I had in one of my journal with me videos, and you can go see how I talk through creating the spreads. Stars of Chaos and Case File Compendium. I lifted both of these completely off of the covers of both series. You can see the cover of 𝕍𝕆𝔸 compendium right here. I've tried to use the colors, and then the title is pretty much the way it's written on the cover, or at least my attempt of making it look like how it looks on the cover. Same thing for Stars of Chaos. The colors, the design, everything. I talked through this in one of my journal with me videos as well. Same thing with everything else here. That brings us to November. This was when my reading volume started to slow down a little bit because I traveled at the end of the month for my solo trip, but I still managed to read quite a bit, and I actually did not complete my my spreads for both November and December until January of 2025. So some of this might look a little bit rushed because they were, and not as much effort went into them. I just focused on writing down my thoughts for some of these things. These two were audiobooks, so I had much more to write down for the both of them because I didn't have the space to annotate, and I didn't take as many notes as I would have liked to on Notion, because I mostly listened to them while I was doing other stuff, maybe driving or maybe cleaning around the house. And then yeah, these as well, I just try to keep the spreads as simple as possible, except the next one, which was my favorite spread of the year. It's a 4-page spread, and this is for the Diaries series. I already started mapping this out before I even started working on all the other spreads in November and December. So it was very, very important to me that I saw my vision of this spread through to the very end, and I did. And I'm very, very happy about it. So there's a circle cut out here, and when you have it open this way, you see the picture of Will on the cover of Diaries, which is why I have the title Diaries here, and some other decorative items there that you can see. And then when you flip it this way, you see the picture of him on the cover of Dark Hair, as well as the title right up here. And I just love how this turned out. You probably can't see very much of it, but I'm obsessed with this spread. I love it very, very much, and I just love how it turned out. But yeah. This was another spread that I tried to gamify, Guide on How to Fail at Online Dating, also by 𝕍𝕆𝔻𝕀𝔸 esports spread. It doesn't look very gamey, and this one I focused on mostly drawing the connections between some of the characters, because there's an in-game aspect and an IRL aspect for a lot of these characters, and for the most part of the series, they don't know that they're interacting with each other. Even though they know each other IRL, they don't know that the game version of this person that they're interacting with is the same person that they're interacting with in real life. So yeah, I thought it was interesting to draw how they interact, or their relationship with each other in this kind of character. What do you call these things again? Whatever. I think you understand what I'm saying, but yeah. And I believe these two bring me to the end of my November spreads. December, you saw that I didn't read a whole lot in that month, so this is pretty straightforward. I read Low Tide and Twilight, and I actually really, really, really enjoyed this series. Not the overall message of the story, okay? There were some problematic elements. My favorite part of the story was Woo-young and Woo-hyun's story. I felt so connected to Woo-hyun as a person, and a lot of the choices and struggles that the author wrote revolving around his life. And even though, what's the name of this guy? Is it Yoo Tae-ju? His love interest in the series wasn't the best person at the beginning of the series. I think his love for Woo-hyun was very evident to see. That is not me trying to justify a lot of the actions that he took in the beginning of the series, but you know what? I don't think this is the place to talk about this. If you're curious, maybe put a comment in the section and I can make an entire video dedicated to my thoughts on this series. But yeah, and I enjoyed this more than I expected, mostly for these two brothers and the story of their lives. So yeah. And then these were my last two spreads for the year 2024. Golden Terrace and the Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish. You flip over and then we're back to my reading stats. So yeah, that is the end of today's video. And I believe I have 2 more videos that I was working on in 2024 that should be up by now. This should wrap up my 2024 videos, and I can now properly focus on creating content for the year 2025. But whatever day you find yourself watching this, make it a great one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.